the teleconnections indexes indicating Arctic air on its way out. The Arctic oscillation, AO, negative, becoming positive, which means a increase in the speed of the hemispheric flow that tends to keep the cold air from coming down. Also, PNA going from positive to negative. That means we don't get that good northwesterly flow into the U.S. And NAO going from negative to positive, which means the flow overall is speeding up into the Atlantic, which again carries the Arctic air eastward. Now, that's not to say that we can't get a good polar outbreak into the U.S., but the production of those very large Arctic air masses in the Yukon, Alaska, the Northwest Territories, that is on the decline. We do see minus 30s and minus 40s indicated by the orange colors in the Canadian high Arctic. Some of that comes down into Manitoba towards the weekend and modifies over the northern plains and the Great Lakes area, and that affects the usual areas. North Dakota seeing some bitterly cold temperatures, but that air is taking that familiar southeast trajectory. Another frontal system comes together late next week. This also is heading south, but as you might guess, that deep Hudson Bay low probably is going to arc it into eastern Canada and the northeastern U.S. So compare that with February of 2021. Many of you may remember this. This also went by the name Uri, U-R-I. And what we see is the coldest Arctic air, the oranges, across a huge area. And look at those pressures, 1050 millibars in the Beaufort Sea and northern Alaska. So if we go forward from February 10th of 2021 into the following week, that cold air continues to reinforce and comes south into the U.S. So that is how a big Arctic outbreak comes together. Santa Ana winds in Los Angeles, producing devastating fires. Let's take a look at that area of the country. We go all the way back to yesterday morning. Strong northerly flow and a strong pressure gradient between the California desert and the Nevada Great Basin. And there's the Palisades fire smoke plume extending south and further to the east, the telltale gravity waves, the mountain waves, extending southward from the interior mountain ranges. We go into the overnight hours. The fire continues to flare up there, and we see the hot spot in the infrared imagery in a second spot near Altadena, which raged overnight. Looks like another one up there. Not sure what city that is. In the northern San Fernando Valley. Then we go into the morning. You can see mountain wave cloud structures picking up there in the San Gabriel range. The smoke and the fires obscured a little bit. But as we go into this afternoon, looks like an improving trend. Can still see the fires right there, but the smoke plumes not quite as well defined. However, the firefighting operations suffering from a profound lack of water, especially in Altadena. So we're not going to go over the news and the evacuations. That's more of a news channel thing, but we will cover the meteorological aspects. Yesterday, 04 UTC, that's going to be about 8 p.m. last night. You can see the winds up to 54 knots at Burbank with blowing dust. And this is when things were really picking up. Then we go forward through the evening up to 62 knots at Burbank. That's about 70 miles an hour for gusts. And those winds raged overnight with lighter velocities down around Los Angeles International Airport and Santa Monica. In the hills, the winds were up near 70 to 80 miles per hour. But gradually, the gradients let up a little bit towards this morning, and we see the gusts dropping off to about 30 knots. And we go up to the current time, looking at about 31 to 33 knots at Burbank and Van Nuys, and Santa Monica 30 knots, 22 at LAX, and through the rest of the valley, Pasadena, San Dimas, looking at about 5 to 10 knots for sustained winds, and then we pick up higher gusts out near Riverside and San Bernardino. Looking at those pressure gradients between Lancaster and LAX, anywhere from 5 millibars up should be enough to get Santa Ana winds going. We're 6 at this hour, and it's been a persistent 6 to 7 for the past several hours. The models do not have a very good handle on this, but they are indicating continued Santa Ana conditions through the night and again tomorrow night. The gradient between Tonopah and Los Angeles, that's more of a classic indicator. 10 millibars is what we need for Santa Ana wind conditions, and it has been about 10 to 13. Last night it was about 16. So for tonight, not quite as bad as what we had last night, but still very strong values, probably increasing during the night. And this is indicating Santa Ana winds continuing through tomorrow and into tomorrow night. However, the gradient is not everything. Here's the high-resolution rapid refresh model forecast for the Palisades, Santa Monica area. The winds trending slowly downward. It is showing a little bit of an increase around 4 to 8Z. That's going to be, 8 p.m. until midnight, and then declining after midnight. Let's look at the Altadena area. That shows things picking up a little bit around 6 to 7 p.m., a lull after that, and then just kind of slowly increasing during the night until about 3 in the morning. But, winds are not really indicated to be very strong by this particular model. All right, checking out the surface analysis for today. We've got a ridge extending from Ontario down to Texas. West of the ridge, southerly flow driving this warm front through the Dakotas. Temperatures rising to above freezing at Bismarck. In the Gulf, cold advection flowing southward, and you probably saw that on the opening clip. Stratocumulus extending all the way down the east coast and into the Gulf. In the northern part of Mexico, this thing coming together. Let me give you a better look at that. This is a polar front that is unusually far south. We are going to be seeing baroclinic development along that front. It's going to pick up this wave. That's going to traverse, will actually move just south of Texas, but we will get some of the effects of that, and that will produce wintry weather through a corridor from the Edwards Plateau, North Texas, into Arkansas, and into Tennessee. And in fact, much of the eastern U.S. going into Friday and Saturday. And let's just cover Alaska really quickly. We head up north. We're going to look at all this in just a minute. A strong frontal system in the Gulf of Alaska, 970 millibar low, driving this intense southerly flow. Unusually warm weather in southeastern Alaska. Temperatures rising into the 40s and even close to 50 degrees. Rain breaking out across southeastern Alaska, and some of that warm weather flowing into southern Alaska. Temperatures very warm, up to 20 degrees. Quite a change from last week when it was closer to minus 30 to minus 40. We still have plenty of Arctic air up to the north. No advisories in effect for Alaska except on the Dalton Highway near that warm front. We do have a winter weather advisory for periods of snow and blowing snow. Heading into northern Canada, a stout block of Arctic air from Baffin Island to Victoria Island. This low over the southern part of Nunavut, that's prompted blizzard warnings. Places like Arviat, Rankin Inlet, Well Cove, and Baker Lake. Snow and blowing snow expected there. The prairies looking pretty good. Downslope flow warming those temperatures into the 40s. Further east, out in Quebec, we've got snowfall warnings from Rivière-du-Loup to the Gaspé Peninsula, right there, 6 to 12 inches through tomorrow morning. Other snow problems north of Quebec City into the interior regions, Roberval and Lac Saint Jean, 4 to 12 inches tonight and Thursday. And of course, as you go south, lake effect snows across the eastern Great Lakes. In the northeastern U.S., we've got classic cold advection patterns. Lake effect convection and lake effect snows hitting southern Ontario pretty hard. Also in New York, they've got winter weather advisories for yet another day. In the Syracuse, Binghamton area, they're looking for about 2 to 6 inches with blowing and drifting snow. In the Adirondacks and the Green Mountains, winter weather advisories through tomorrow, 2 to 8 inches of snow, and winter weather advisories in the Lake Erie snowbelt. All the way down to Oil City, Warren, Bradford, 2 to 3 inches there, with 3 to 5 closer to the lake. Further south, we've got more winter weather advisories down the Allegheny Mountains through tomorrow, South Pennsylvania to eastern West Virginia, 1 to 3 inches of snow, with a winter storm warning in the higher elevations just east of Beckley. Checking out the southeastern U.S., cold advection there as well. You can see the cloud streets on the tail end right through the Blue Ridge Mountains. Clear skies across Virginia, the Carolinas, into Florida. Some cold weather pushing southward into Tampa and Vero Beach. Highs there only in the 50s. But out to the west, bad weather coming in, and we're looking at a possible winter storm across much of this corridor right here. All of Tennessee, most of Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, north of a Greenwood to Starkville, Birmingham, Atlanta line under a winter storm watch, mostly for Friday. The possibility of 3 to 8 inches in that winter storm watch area with lesser amounts near the border. And they've already got winter storm warnings out in western Tennessee for the Memphis, Jackson area, 4 to 6 inches, mostly Thursday night into Friday. This is the snow forecast from the National Digital Forecast Database. So this takes into account human preparation at the different forecast offices. And you can see some disagreements between the different offices along these boundaries. That's useful information. These guys have been looking at the data longer than you and I have. So we can kind of, take a shortcut there and get an idea of their sense of confidence in what they're forecasting. For example, right here, looks like the Jackson, Mississippi office is forecasting more bullish snowfall amounts than Memphis because we've got higher amounts right near that interface coming from the Jackson office. But overall, the pattern is pretty much the same. Looking for a corridor of heavy snow across the Hot Springs area to Little Rock along the Interstate 40 corridor, anywhere from 7 to 10 inches. This area has definitely shifted to the northeast. A couple days ago, the axis of that snowfall was right over Dallas. They were looking for 5 to 7 inches there. And lo and behold, yesterday it shifted north. And of course, many residents of DFW, they're accustomed to that. Big snowfall is always downgraded, it seems. I don't know if that's true. I guess you'd have to go through and verify the data. But further to the east, these are the snowfall totals through late Saturday. Widespread corridor of 4 to 5 inches across Kentucky and Tennessee, possibly extending down into the area just north of Atlanta. So there you go. There's the overall picture, the axis of the storm going something like that. But down to the south, that's where we're going to look for the possibility of maybe some ice. Usually there's a secondary track which has that ice, and let's see what we're forecasting. These are not very high amounts. The damaging ice totals, those are going to be in the half-inch to 1-inch range. These are just barely enough to take large limbs down. You can get some power outages with that, but the ice starts out in the Edwards Plateau, traverses the Arklatex up through El Dorado, through Starkville, and they're going for lesser amounts out to Birmingham, and then Atlanta going more bullish with those ice amounts. So that, right there you can get some useful information off the graphic. So ice possible from Atlanta all the way to just south of Charleston. And let me just take you very quickly through the advisories. We start out in Arizona. That's actually a freeze warning. The winter weather advisories pick up in the El Paso forecast area down to the Big Bend and across the Edwards Plateau. The winter storm warnings and winter storm watches, those start in the DFW area. They expand into that corridor right there is a winter storm warning. And then we pick up the watches further to the east because that's more unknown at this time. So you're looking at anywhere from Atlanta, Birmingham, up to Lexington and Evansville, maybe just south of there. For today, however, the winter storm still in the process of organization. The warm conveyor belt well to the south. In fact, let me just take you down there into Mexico. And that's where we find our developing winter storm. We have the cold core occlusion off in the northern Gulf of California. We've got the hammerhead type comet cloud looking like that. You probably recognize that from textbooks, and sometimes it becomes more obvious if you look at the water vapor imagery. Haven't really looked at this yet, but there it is. We've got a dry slot coming in from the southwest into the Hermosillo area. Warm conveyor belt and maybe a bit of a atmospheric river across northern Mexico. And gradually this is going to start wrapping up and look more like a classic winter storm over the next day or so as it emerges from the southern Rockies, the Sierra Madres. The effects from that winter storm will come as far north as Oklahoma, most of the state under a winter weather advisory. But further north, not really looking for very much. You can see some snow on the ground across Kansas, Missouri, into Illinois, and a Alberta clipper coming in from the northwest. So it's kind of hard to see right there, but you go to your handy water vapor imagery and things start to take shape a little bit better. Still kind of hard to see, but there is somewhat of an S shape. See that right there at the very end? Let me paint that out for you. It's going to run like that. That tells you that there's a wave embedded in that northwesterly flow. Let's take a look at the upper air charts. And there it is. 12 p.m. today. Wave passing through Montana. The divergent area aloft, the upward motion just to the east. And then at 6 p.m., kind of breaks into two lobes like that with a jet max across the Sawtooth Range. Is that the Sawtooth? I'm thinking maybe Salmon River Mountains. Where is the Sawtooth? I'm not sure where I'm getting that. But down to the south, there's that very deep low out there in the Gulf of California and that intense northerly flow helping to drive those Santa Ana winds. So let's shift down here and look at the weather in the southwest. Well, a lot of the southwestern U.S. under fair conditions, even down there in Arizona and southern California. But as that mountain wave activity diminishes, we do see the smoke plumes coming out of the Los Angeles area. And let's take a look at the warnings and advisories. Southeastern Arizona, freeze warnings. Temperatures will be down into the 20s tonight, tomorrow night, the next night, and so on, with teens in the higher valleys. And across the border into New Mexico, we've got winter weather advisories due to snow. This is kind of a very hard boundary, so I would consider this kind of blurred. Maybe the possibility for some snow in southeastern Arizona, maybe the possibility for very cold nights further to the east. In California, high wind warning until 6 p.m. Not sure if that's going to continue into tonight. I think the forecasts have been trending that wind down, even though the gradients are still supportive of Santa Ana wind conditions. The peak, that's going to be a continued red flag warning into tomorrow, and we will have a continuation of supportive conditions through tomorrow and tomorrow night, possibly into early Friday. Let's take one last look at the satellite data with that fire product. There's the Palisades fire. Then we're going to see the Altadena fire get going overnight. Then we go into this morning, and you can see they get obscured by some of that mountain wave activity. And that brings us up to the current time. The light is falling, but the Palisades fire continuing to burn. Looks like some decline on the Altadena fire. And I am trying to get this program wrapped up. It takes many hours to put together, and during those many hours, you all are waiting for an episode to drop. So I should get this wrapped up. Anyway, the Pacific Northwest, mild conditions, temperatures in the 50s, Seattle and Portland, 30s and 40s in the interior. And there's that wave that we talked about earlier, traversing Montana and dropping into the northern plains. A lot of fog and stratus throughout the Columbia River Basin into the Bitterroots. And how's the Snake River Valley doing? Well, looks pretty clear of fog. All I'm seeing right here, 5,000-foot ceilings. Those are going to be stratocumulus layers. Do we have any viewers in Idaho? Reach out on comments and let us know. And if those California fires have affected you in some way, post in comments. Let us know your story. I'm very curious. I know we do have viewers out there in California. Anyways, you can see here, I've got the Q vectors. We haven't done this in a while. I'll just kind of zip through this. This shows us the upper energy moving through the flow here. Here's a couplet, downward motion, upward motion being suggested. That's that wave right there coming across Montana. We go forward into tonight. Wow, that actually drops south through the Rockies and comes into phase with that other trough. So not really coming out into the northern plains as we would normally expect. So this whole area here condensing and coalescing into a big storm system. And finally, the dynamics come out into Texas tomorrow night and then into early Friday. And there's that first wave moving out into Tennessee, Memphis for midday on Friday. And finally, looks like a huge amount of upper level lift for Friday night across much of the southeast Tennessee, and then just kind of deforming northeast, southwest across the southeastern states and Atlantic seaboard. Now, this is interesting. There's a wave dropping down the backside of that trough. Not sure if we've had any moisture recovery, so there may not be much to work with as far as that goes. And indeed, no development really. I think that's probably it exiting. Another trough coming in from the west for Monday. And you can follow along. Oh, another trough shearing off. So we'll have to watch for the Santa Anas to develop next week, although this is more of a easterly and southeasterly flow. So, we'll wait and see how that goes. And then we look at atmospheric rivers. Nothing really for today, but for tomorrow. Moisture return ahead of that winter storm. And you can see that interaction there as everything moves to the east. Then going into the weekend and early next week, looks pretty dry across the country. Nothing impacting the west coast. This is all energy coming out of the Gulf. So this suggests probably a round of stormy weather in the southeastern U.S. About 10 days from now. Again, we'll wait and see how that goes. And finally, we wrap up with the forecast, starting out with the current conditions, going into midnight and tomorrow. There's the winter storm trying to come together across Texas. Mixed phase precipitation through the I-20, I-30 corridor with snow up to the Interstate 40 corridor in Oklahoma and Arkansas. 6 p.m. looks like convective elements developing across Waco, Lufkin, down to Austin, as we start to get some healthy interaction with moisture, and then things start moving to the east Thursday night into Friday. You can see the snow well to the north, now starting to wrap around into Dallas after midnight, and wrapping around into Texarkana around dawn on Friday, and everything lifts rapidly to the east. This is when we're laying down that snow belt right there north of Starkville, north of Greenwood, up into the Memphis area. That's going to be midday Friday. And then Friday afternoon and evening, now the Carolinas starting to be affected possibly by freezing rain and sleet with snow up there in Tennessee up to Cincinnati and Columbus. Anyway, we look out to the northwest, another Pacific system moving inland and crossing the Rockies pretty quickly during the weekend, but it appears to be a dry system. 1030 millibar high up to the north in Canada. That does not impress me much, to quote one of those country singers. 1030 is not really going to push much cold air southward, so this will affect mostly the Midwest. Then we go into the extended period. A couple of weak clippers. Not very impressive there either. This is kind of a wild card around Thursday next week. This indicates a cutoff low in the southwestern U.S. You saw that there on those Q vector charts. That appears to move eastward into the southwest region. Maybe some rain and snow for Arizona, New Mexico. But a lot of unknowns at this point. And you can see not much prospect for wintry weather in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas. Appears to be a pretty stout warm air advection return. And that's all I've got for this episode of Forecast Lab. Please post in comments to let me know what the weather is doing in your area. And don't forget to mention where that area is so we can relate that geographically. If you're in California, tell your story about what has happened out there. I've definitely been checking out the disaster that has unfolded. Very, very unfortunate. Some of the scenes that we've seen last night and today. Also, if you're looking forward to the wintry weather, post in comments, and you might want to try to venture a forecast, and maybe you have some ideas what might really transpire, especially if you're in Dallas and Little Rock, where things tend to get very unpredictable sometimes. All right, hope you have a great Wednesday night. Take care, and we will see you on Friday. Bye-bye.